Um, Welcome, friends, to this session, meditation and dhamma teaching session, and hopefully some time for questions also at the end. So, yeah, as usual, I'd like to suggest that we begin the session with some time for meditation. So, settling into the space, and we can sit together for about 30 minutes, and I'll give a little bit of guidance just to begin the meditation session. So coming into body awareness, and it's always good to begin by noticing the posture, and we can just give some time to adjust the body so that there's a comfortable and upright posture. And coming into the body, feeling out the sense of embodiment, the sense of presence. What can we feel? How do we know that we're here? Breathing into the chest, into the belly, feeling the motion of air flowing maybe through the nostrils, expanding the body, bringing in energy, cool, fresh air, our life force. We can feel the kind of vitality that comes in with the in-breaths. You're really noticing how it is as the body breathes in. Breathing out, also different experience, a letting go and relaxing, releasing. Really noticing the breath and noticing the spaces between the breaths. Also, the pauses, that stillness, and all the time allowing the natural, normal rhythm of the breath. Simply observing. And so it is with our meditation practice, we are cultivating the ability to simply be present, aware, attentive to the experience of this moment. So helpful to close the eyes and to come into this felt sense, body here, breathing. We have no agenda. We have nothing to do. It's so good to make time for formal meditation so we can let go of all our sense of responsibilities for this or that, the need to do this or that, or the agendas that we have in our daily life, just to have a space here, like the pause between the breaths, where we are allowing the body and mind to come to stillness, peacefulness, relaxation, letting go of all grief and covetousness for the world, all the wanting, all the struggle, all the aversion, all the hurry and flurry, just to let it all go at this point, in this moment, at this time, and simply breathe, sit, witness what is, when all extraneous thoughts and cares are able to just fall away for now. So the great letting go that's possible for us when we have a meditation practice. It's a very precious opportunity for us to simply be present, allow whatever is happening now, and to keep sharpening, honing, growing this ability to attend to the body, to the breath, feeling out what's happening right now in the body. How is it? Giving our attention to this simple experience of embodiment, and let everything else be arising and passing, not getting involved with thinking, not getting involved with past or future speculation, any kind of mental activity can be rolling on. We don't need to get involved. Just let it be and keep coming back to this beautiful breath, this easeful object of attention. So we can sit together for another little while, and I'll ring the gong in 20 minutes or so. Just enjoying this precious time for practice. So, welcome again, friends, and big gratitude and respects to Bhante Siddhasu and Ayya Soma for this opportunity to share on Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namasami. So I hope you had a good meditation time, those who were able to sit for the last half hour or so. It's really helpful to have a pause and a bit of time for practice before we hear the Dhamma, because, to have a kind of receptivity, to be able to really listen and receive and tune in to the Dhamma, it's helpful to be aware of the body, to be aware of this space, to be able to kind of, in a way, be emptied out, so that we're not caught up so much in our everyday cares and concerns, and we can really give ear to the teachings. And I'm struck again and again by how the Buddha repeatedly told his disciples, that he was teaching one thing only. The great simile, the story of the handful of leaves that probably many of you know, where the Buddha's walking in the forest with a group of people, and he picks up a handful of leaves from the floor of the forest and asks those disciples around him, so which is greater, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in this whole forest around us? And they say, well, of course, the leaves in your hand are so small, so tiny compared to all the leaves in the forest around us. And the Buddha said, well, just in the same way, what I'm actually wanting to convey to you, what I'm actually teaching, what I'll speak about and point to is just this much, just the leaves in my hand. And that is, I'll speak on suffering and the end of suffering, just this much. And often, the Buddha was asked all sorts of questions about, well, what happens to you after you die? What happens to us after we die? What is the cause of this universe coming into existence? Why is it here? What's the point? What's the purpose of all of this? And the Buddha simply, oftentimes just didn't go there. He didn't respond to such questions, but he would encourage his questioners to reconsider what their inquiry, ask maybe the right kind of questions, and the questions, then the right approach to inquiry, the right investigation for us, the most useful and liberating avenue of inquiry and investigation is, of course, to look at suffering, and then thereby, to see, to find the way out of suffering, through following the Buddha's teachings, his guidance. And so this is what the Buddha was offering. And it's a subtle teaching, really. The Dhamma is very subtle and very profound. It's also, in some ways, very simple for us, because if we can practice meditation and follow the advice of the Buddha to bring the attention to the fore, to sit in a quiet place and to let go of all the attachments to worldly life, to let go of all grief and covetousness for the world, then we can begin to really investigate reality in the present, in this embodied state. What do we have to work with? Well, we have the 5 khandhas, the 5 heaps, the 5 aggregates. So we can work with, we can investigate, and we can really pay attention very simply, to this body, the feelings that we experience, the perceptions that we experience as they arise and pass away, thoughts, ideas, memories, concepts, views and opinions, and consciousness. These 5 aspects of our reality we can really investigate and see where the suffering is to be found. What is suffering? And what is the way out of suffering? See how we can let go of that suffering through this investigation. So there's a kind of simplicity, in a way, a simple willingness to be present and to observe what is arising and passing in each moment. But also very subtle, very profound is this teaching, which is really pointing to the causes of suffering and then the way to let go of suffering. And we can often feel that there's all sorts of reasons why I'm suffering that are kind of out there, kind of that person and the way they're behaving, the way they're treating me, or this situation that I'm in that is, if it wasn't for this awful thing that's happening or has happened, then I would be okay, actually. And so we have often our perceptions around suffering are really around the causes as being sort of something out there, something therefore, not something that we can really help or change or have any agency around. And this is really unfortunate when we perceive in this deluded way that our suffering is something outside of us, therefore something we can't see our way through, we can't let go of. This is not actually how it is it? The Buddha said, he told a monk called Yamaka, on one time he gave Yamaka a simile to explain how it is that we can always find the source of suffering to be very close. It's not out there, it's close to us, it's within us. And this is so liberating in and of itself, this reality, this truth, that suffering is always due to our attitude, our perceptions, our misconceptions, in a way, regarding the nature of reality. The reason this is really good news for us, this is really wonderful, is that then we have the ability to actually understand that suffering, and through understanding it, we can then let go of suffering. So the Buddha said to Yamaka, this monk who was really seeking clarity in terms of the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha said to him, well, what do you do? What would one do if the intention was to assassinate a person, a hired assassin? How would they, fulfill their job, their contract? Sorry, it's a bit of a quite unpleasant simile, but it is a very useful one. So a hired assassin, how are they going to carry out their task, to kill a person, if they, try and approach from a distance, it's going to be very difficult to get away with this task without becoming, captured, or without being caught in the act, or without being able to really perhaps succeed. How does an assassin get close to their victim? And the way an assassin can carry out their function very effectively is to get themselves employed by the person that they're trying to kill, to become close to them, to be a good friend to them, to serve them in some way, to be useful to them, to be a good and faithful, loyal and helpful friend. And then, having won the confidence of the person, they will have many opportunities to be alone with, to be with the person in a state of vulnerability, and the time will come when they can very easily dispatch their victim and get away. And it's quite a striking simile for us, because the Buddha goes on to say, yes, if we are wise, we'll see that the killer amongst us is actually something very close to us, very much in our confidence. It's the things that we rely on the most that are the most dangerous for us. And I find this very helpful and very powerful as a teaching, because of the tendency to kind of blame and cast my sense of suffering out onto others, onto external situations. It's very natural for us to do this in a way. We're conditioned to do this. I feel uncomfortable. I feel suffering here. Who's to blame? And the finger kind of goes out and we can start, to look for the cause outside of ourselves. But the reality, as we can see in this simile, is that the assassin, that the source of our suffering, the cause of our suffering, is very close to home. We can look inside, if we're wise, when there's suffering, when there's discontent, when there's that feeling of unsatisfactoriness, things are not well, something's not right. This is a time to come close to home and see, where is the problem really? Where is the assassin lurking? And the assassin, the Buddha said in this simile, is to be found in the 5 khandhas. So again, coming to the body, coming to the feelings, our perceptions, our thoughts and views about whatever we're experiencing, this consciousness, and we'll find that the source of suffering is always within this realm, within these 5 heaps. So for instance, somebody comes along and insults me. The obvious response is to lash back, say something back, lash out at such a person. We know that this only creates more suffering. So as a skillful Buddhist, we will try and restrain ourselves and not retaliate, not create more suffering, not add more fire to the flames, more fuel to the flames. This much we can do. We understand, how to behave in such a way that we're only manifesting right speech, right action. So we don't retaliate, but we may feel upset. We may feel offended. There may be suffering. that comes for us as a result of what's happened, either immediately or even on reflection. When we think about what's happened, we can be suffering. And the sense can be that the source, the cause of this suffering is that person and what that person said. And if they hadn't done that, I'd be fine. But because they've said this, I'm really unhappy. It's their fault. It's their fault. They've wronged me. They've hurt me. They've harmed me. And when we have this very, in a way, natural, conditioned attitude to an experience of being insulted, we're simply suffering. We're creating often more suffering. We very naturally, in a way, create more suffering because we think over and kind of, it's hard sometimes to dislodge an upsetting or traumatic episode that's happened for us. It will tend to replay. Our hurt feelings will tend to grow, and we'll think of all sorts of maybe negative things and project into the future more suffering, how we're going to respond or retaliate, and so the mind will latch onto some kind of negative experience and really make it me and make it mine, and roll on in suffering if we're not awake to what's happening. But what we can do is recognize the assassin, the killer. The source of the suffering is actually always close to us. It's the things we lean on, the things we most identify with, that are the source of our suffering. And that would be, in this case, our perceptions, our memories. It's ours, Something happened in the past that was difficult, jarring, created some kind of reactivity for us. And then we can see that that incident is over, it's finished, it's gone, but that perceptions, thoughts, and feelings are rolling on in suffering. And it's right here. And this is, yes, it can be difficult to deal with dukkha. It can be painful to have to sit with these kinds of responses. But how wonderful that we can do this, and we can see then that the truth of our suffering is here, and therefore we can let go of that suffering. That suffering can pass through. We can be willing to face, to kind of open to the ouch that we've experienced, and really come home to that suffering. And when we can do this, when we can attend, in short, when we can attend to what is suffering, then we can let go very quickly. So we're kind of stripping away a whole lot of proliferation, imagination, when we bring back our attention to the source of suffering, recognizing it's always here. Nobody can hurt me. Nobody can harm me. Nobody can cause me to suffer. What causes our suffering is this, this response to what happens, this making it mine, this heart feeling of ill at ease or dis-ease or unhappiness. It's always here. And so we always have agency. We always have the ability to let go of suffering whenever it arises. It always arises here. I find this simile then of the assassin to be very helpful, and just to see that there's no enemy out there, to really recognize there's nothing out there that can really shake, ruffle, upset, or confuse me. This sense of suffering is always accessible. It's always workable. We can always come home to the dukkha that's within, and we can watch it transform. We can watch it arising, lasting for some time, and then inevitably passing away. And sometimes it can be wave after wave of thoughts, feelings, perceptions. But once we've understood this truth, we know what to do. We know how to let go of suffering. And it's like coming back again and again to this simple handful of leaves, and leaving the forest alone. And we have to kind of work with our conditioning here. We have to be willing to keep remembering, really, that all our perceptions around the other are not useful to us. The leaves in the forest, the world out there, these kind of perceptions of self and other don't really serve us very well. But if we're able to really dwell in this experience here and now, then we can very quickly work through, let go of, see through all the causes of suffering as they arise here in the human heart, here in the chitta, here in the mind, through the 5 khandhas, the 5 heaps, the 5 aggregates: body, feelings, perceptions, thinking, and consciousness itself. In the same way, we can also cultivate well-being here, our sense of well-being, our sense of happiness, our sense of living a good life, benefiting from that. Our agency for the good is also right here for us. It's always here. It's always available to us. There's a beautiful story in the Samyutta Nikaya where there's a monk called Wakali, and he's a very devoted disciple of the Buddha. And there's a time when Wakali was living in the mountains, the hills, around what's now Rajgir. In the time of the Buddha, there's a place called Rajagaha. And this was a kingdom of King Bimbisara. And there was a town, or city, in a valley surrounded by high forested hills. And the Buddhist monastics would spend time practicing up in these hills in various caves and kind of rocky overhangs, up in the crags and peaks of the hills around Rajgir, living very ascetic lives, coming into the town, down the hills into town for their alms round, and going back up to their solitary abiding places for the rest of the day. The Buddha spent quite a lot of time, particularly up in a place called Vulture's Peak. And pilgrims, of course, go there to this day, and you can experience wonderful atmosphere and solitude that's possible up in these mountains, even now, with their many caves and grottos. And Vulture's Peak is thought to be a certain spot where they've made a little temple for people to go and practice. So it's a very wonderful place. And there was Wakali, way back in the time of the Buddha, practicing up in this area. And he became very unwell, very sick. And he, at one point, asked if it would be possible for the Buddha to please come and see him at some point. And the Buddha went to visit him and asked him, "How are you? Are your symptoms getting better, or are they getting worse? Are you in pain, or is the pain easing? How is it for you?" And Wakali replied, I'm just getting more and more sick. The pain is increasing. I'm getting more and more weak. Things are not improving for me. Things are actually getting worse physically. And the Buddha kind of encouraged and roused Wakali up with some Dhamma teachings and asked him, "Do you have any regrets? Any remorse or regret?" And Wakali said, "Well, yes, I do." And the Buddha said, "Is there anything that you have done that you need to anything that you're doing in your practice that you need to change? Wakali said, no, I understand the teachings. I understand how to practice. So the Buddha said, what is your regret? And Wakali said, I only have one regret, and that is that I haven't visited the Buddha often enough. I find that very touching. The Buddha said to Wakali, enough of this. He said, why would you want to come and see this rotten body? And he went on to say to Wakali, when you're following my teachings faithfully as you are, then Wakali, you're very close to the Buddha. You're not far from the Buddha. You're right with the Buddha. If you were not practicing the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, faithfully, then yes, you would be far from the Buddha, even if you were sitting right next to him. So this beautiful teaching and encouragement for Wakali Bhikkhu. The Buddha went away and Wakali continued to practice. And actually, he became an arahant before he passed away, or at the moment he passed away. It's not quite clear which, but he fully realized the end of all suffering. And I find this teaching, the whole sutta about Wakali and his last days is very touching, but this teaching from the Buddha is really worth considering. It's not the only place where the Buddha speaks in this way, but this sense that we have right here, right now, the opportunity, to be very close to the Buddha, if we can follow the Buddha's teachings faithfully, with bringing all of our energy and cultivating understanding, a willingness to keep coming back to the teachings again and again, and to really consider them deeply and allow our understanding to deepen over time, and keep meditating, keep practicing well. And of course, in order to be able to meditate, we really want to develop the path factors of right speech, right action, right livelihood, so that we're free from remorse, we're free from regret, and we have minds that have a degree of peace and ease that we can then apply right effort and develop mindfulness. And from this ability to practice meditation, develop mindfulness, we can develop stillness, peace, clarity, the ability to see the Dhamma. And we have this agency. We have this agency to make choices around what happens right now, how we relate to this present moment. To see that, as I was saying, where there's suffering, we can take responsibility straight away. Don't waste any time projecting out onto others or onto situations and casting blame left, right, and center, but rather to see that where there's suffering, well, it's right here, and I can attend to this suffering. I can let go of this suffering if I'm willing to face it, to recognize that it's always in relation to this body, these feelings, these perceptions, these thoughts, this consciousness. This is where the suffering's to be found every time. So through investigation, I can really understand. I can really stand under this sense of suffering, and then there's the possibility of letting go, of seeing clearly, of watching painful thoughts and feelings arising and passing away. And equally, I can be close to the Buddha right now, in every moment, when I'm cultivating practice, when I'm considering the path, when I'm giving my energy and attention to the path of practice. Here's the Buddha. Here's the Buddha. What is Buddha? Yes, Buddha was the historical figure, human being who lived 2,000, nearly 600 years ago. But also Buddha, of course, simply means awake. I can be awake. I can wake up. I can open up to reality. I can face reality. I can dwell, on the handful of leaves, and leave everything else alone. Leave the forest alone. Yes, it's there. Yes, it is part of reality. There is wider reality. I can accept that and I can allow that simply to be. But I can give my attention and my energy to waking up to suffering and the causes of suffering. And when we actually direct our attention to the handful of leaves, when we really focus on that, then of course suffering is seen through. It arises and it passes. It's not me, it's not mine. I don't have to hold on to any of that. And then I can continue to develop my closeness, my intimate association, my friendship, my really bring home Buddha, the Buddha, that which is awake. I can really dwell in this. I can really take this as my refuge. And so we have this extraordinary choice. And it's really quite remarkable to recognize, just to recognize that we are completely capable of choosing what attitude do I want to have. Shall I choose the attitude that's free from suffering, that's letting go of suffering in every moment, that is Buddha, right here, that is awake, waking up moment by moment, and therefore, thereby, allowing the heart, allowing the mind to slowly but surely free up from all the past conditioning, all the habits of suffering, really, to let go of all past karma. And we can appreciate this process when we're mindful, because we can see how things happen around us, within us. Suffering arises as a consequence again and again. We can observe the suffering. We can let go of the suffering. We can learn. We can wise up. We can gain clarity and insight step by step, step by step. And slowly but surely the mind clears, the fog clears, the mist, the cloud kind of begin to dissipate. And the sword of wisdom can just kind of cut through and we can see more and more clearly. So that, the killer, the assassin, that which is trying to take our life, trying to destroy us, is really apparent to us as our attachment to delusion, our attachment to aversion, attachment to desire. These are the roots of our suffering, and we can relate these ways in which we confuse ourselves and suffer so terribly to the attachment that we have, the sense of self that we have around this body, these feelings, these perceptions, my thoughts, my ideas, my memories, this consciousness. And just recognizing that the suffering is so close. Whenever there's disquiet, whenever there's dis-ease, it's right here for us. We can delve into it and we can investigate. And through this investigation, we can just keep letting go. How wonderful to know that there's no enemies out there. There's nothing out there that can cause our suffering. We can really kind of surf the waves, of life's ups and downs. We can really develop quite naturally then this beautiful quality of equanimity that is even. Good things happen, bad things happen, painful things happen, pleasant things happen. Yes, there is a response. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings arise and pass. But we can very quickly and immediately notice the possibility of getting caught up in the ups and downs of life, and the possibility of not getting caught up in the ups and downs of life, and simply observing and letting go and maintaining our sense of well-being, which gradually, slowly but surely develops as we continue to practice. Maintaining a sense of well-being, maintaining a sense of peacefulness, a sense of benevolence, maintaining a heart of loving kindness, a heart of compassion, a heart of equanimity. This is doable, and it's not at all out of our reach. It's just a matter of being Buddha, being awake, remaining present. And whenever the heart is wanting to point the finger out there, just bringing it back and coming back to this heart and taking responsibility, investigating here. Nothing then can get by us, nothing can elude us. We can be very sharp, we can be very attentive, very vigilant, and kind of root out all the causes of suffering as they arise. So yeah, I wish you all well with this process. And I hope, my intention in speaking in this way is to empower, give a sense of empowerment, a sense of encouragement. This is doable. We can always hone in on, focus in on suffering whenever it arises. And when we are able to give attention, apply our energy to seeking out the sources of suffering, coming back to this temple here and sweeping it out, then we're able to really let go of all suffering and find our way to perfect peace, perfect happiness, which eventually becomes a constant for us. So, thank you so much for your comments, everybody. I'm just having a look at the chat. We've got some time for any questions, comments, reflections from you all. Wonderful to see people from all over the globe. Lovely to know that you're all tuning in. Thank you all. I have a question from Sud. Thanks, Sud. Dear Ayya, how does one let go of remorse that stems from not practicing well, or knowing and realizing we haven't practiced well? And somebody else, John, thanks John for kind of chiming in a lovely way to tell Sud that he's not alone. This is I'm sure for many of us, this comes up, this thought of kind of wishing that we could practice better, sensing that we're not practicing well. So thank you both for this. Okay, Sud, how do we let go of this remorse? Well, I guess one way that we can, I would say, work with this kind of remorse that we can feel around not giving enough time or energy to practice, not practicing well in whatever way we perceive that to be. One way we can work with these thoughts and feelings, is to really pay attention to them and to allow them to be a kind of encouragement to develop our practice, give more time to our practice, to see these kind of thoughts, remorseful thoughts, as a kind of goad, like a way of kind of really encouraging ourselves strongly to change the situation. So that's the value of, hiri or tapa, the conscience that we carry, which can be so valuable, really, as a yardstick for us to reflect on how we're living, what we're doing. Is this wholesome or not? And if I feel remorse, it's encouragement for me to, okay, maybe I feel something a little bit unwholesome going on here. Let me see if I can improve. Let me see if I can move in the right direction, the direction that will reduce these feelings of remorse and regret. So this is one, very positive way of working with these feelings that arise. And then they have a usefulness, and then they become like a kind of encumbrance if we hold on or identify overly with these feelings of remorse. So it's like with anything and everything, Sud, you have an experience. We don't want to hold on to the experience. We don't want to generate more suffering where there's suffering. So to kind of guilt trip ourselves, to keep going on at ourselves, or to obsess about how our practice is not going well, would be to overdo, to add to our suffering. So simply to recognize remorse when it arises, give it some attention, and then see the result of that energy and let it move us in a positive direction is great. And then simply to let go, to let go of those feelings. And my sense is, how do we let go of remorse is to really attend to it. So really give it attention rather than just casting those thoughts aside and ignoring them. No, let's really examine, what is this remorse? Where is it coming from? What do I really think about my practice? How can I change the situation in a good way to meet this sense of remorse, to really address it? And if we do that, if we can really give it the full attention to really bear with that suffering as it arises, to understand that suffering, then we can generally expect to be able to move through, and it passes. It will fade away, So I hope that will be useful to you, and do come back to me if there's any further kind of question that arises as a result of what I've said. Thank you, Sid, and also John, for your kind empathy. Okay. Okay, thank you. Bawani has a question. Instead of killing a person, it's better to leave that person or enemy to live, because life is suffering. Killing will end that person's enemy's suffering. Is this correct way of thinking? Please excuse my ignorance. Thank you for inspiring teaching, for practicing. Thank you, Bhavani. I mean, that's really funny and true. I mean, it's true, really, what you're saying, that actually, really life is suffering, and letting go is letting go of suffering. Letting go of everything is letting go of all suffering. So it's very true to say that we really don't need to think about killing anything or anyone. No. The kindest thing we can do for our sense of enemy, for our sense of having enemies, is to look inside and to see what's happening here. Because somewhere inside there's an enemy being created. There's a sense of, feeling maybe threatened by something, or maybe really having a lot of aversion towards something or someone. And this is the source of enemy. And there's no enemy out there. There's the perception of enemy, and it's here. And I can work with that, and to really relieve that sense of having any kind of enemy at all. We can examine and see, where is suffering here? What's going on? And give a lot of loving kindness to that. give a lot of kind attention to this sense of enemy and see how it can then transform. We can let go. But yes, life is suffering. I mean, I can't disagree with that. And death is a kind of release, it's true. If we have, you could say, unfinished business, if there's still some karmic residue, then life continues, rebirth happens. And so the end of suffering is not death, actually, but it's understanding suffering. There is only one way to end suffering, and this is through practice. And so we have, a limited lifespan as human beings. Every moment is so precious. We have the opportunity to keep doing the good work of seeing suffering and letting go of suffering thereby. So let's focus on that. And other people, let's wish them well, because they're on the same journey. The journey, is one of moving from suffering to the letting go of suffering, to the peace and happiness that can result through our insight, through our right effort, right mindfulness. So that's the best I can offer as a response to your very, interesting statement there, Bhavani. Thank you for that. Okay, Anthony. Hi, Anthony. Thank you for your question. What is your preferred method or meditation to investigate the 5 aggregates? Yeah, thank you for that. There are many ways that we can investigate the aggregates. For instance, we can bring each one to mind and see what's the reality here for me. How do I relate to this teaching? And my actual preferred method of working with the aggregates is to work with the body and to work with feelings. And the reason that I focus on these 2 aggregates is because when meditating and paying attention to the body and to feelings, the mind is able to be present. The body's always here and now. Feelings are always happening now. And there's a kind of genuineness, there's a kind of integrity to what we experience when we pay attention to body and feelings. They don't deceive us. They're very genuine and authentic. And so this is very helpful to be able to rest the attention in that which is real, in that which is part of nature, and follows the laws of nature. So simply to attend in this way. My sense of working with perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness is more or less to in a way keep the attention on the body and on feelings, and to allow the mental aspects of our reality some space, give them space. Because the mind has a quality, an amazing quality of it has the ability to disentangle, to purify, to clarify, if we allow time and space for this work. What I'm trying to say is, if we're filling our minds with input, if we're receiving, through all the sense doors, information, input, reading, watching things, constantly seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, we're going to not have any time. The mind won't have any opportunity to reflect upon itself because it's so busy simply dealing with all the input. So to meditate, of course, is to let go of more, acquiring more from the world, and to be with what is. And so when we come back to the body, come back to feelings, really stop all the mental proliferation, all the mental reception from the outside, as it were, then we can observe, the mind also has a chance to relax, open. And this process of insight, developing awareness, developing mindfulness, really is a way in which the mind can actually, begin to throw up what needs to be seen, what needs to be learned, to let go of past karma, to purify itself. So it's a very dynamic and active process requiring right effort. We have to set the scene, as it were, with good action, good speech, living a harmless life and making effort to cultivate mindfulness. But then we're really allowing these khandhas, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness to open and to disentangle from greed, from hatred, from delusion. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And so, yeah, for me, the way to work with the khandhas, in short, is to focus on the first two, focus on body and feelings, and really allow the mind to open, to relax, to do its work of purification. Thanks, Anthony. Okay, I have a question here from Mary Burns. Thank you, Mary. Our suffering is a mere branch compared to the entire forest, if I understood this correctly. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I guess so. I guess you could say that what we experience as me and mine is usually, certainly as human beings, it's a very small part of the entirety of this universe. It's a very, very small part. And I think that's really helpful to recognize that. This sense of me and mine, it's like a tiny little bubble. And, the whole path of practice is really an encouragement for us to pop the bubble, to let go of anything that we feel to be me and mine, anything that we identify with. And in a way, yes. I mean, thank you for that, because the handful of leaves is what we can work with, what we can, in a way, change for the better. The suffering that we can let go of is the suffering that we experience right here. And, it's interesting that the sense of suffering and the sense of self are really pretty much the same thing. Because if we don't have a sense of self, if we're not holding on to anything and making it me or mine, belonging to me, in me, or that I'm in it, if we're not identifying with anything, then it's not really possible to suffer. And that's a very interesting kind of constellation that comes together. In order to suffer, there needs to be a sense of self and some kind of wanting or not wanting. These things go together. So if you take away any of those three legs of this kind of tripod of suffering, suffering itself, the wanting, and the sense of self, then we can see the whole thing can collapse for us. So, I'm sort of agreeing with you that, yes, we can relate our suffering to the handful of leaves or one branch in the forest. In the simile, the Buddha was really saying, this is the part of our world that we can really profitably focus on and give all our attention to, is this aspect of suffering that we can experience, and to really investigate and explore that. This is the most important work that can be done. So I hope that's helpful, Mary. Thank you for your question. Okay. Last question. John. Thank you, John. So he says, I know we have examples of lay people getting stream entry, but it feels impossible to lose attachments when people depend on you to work, keep relationships, keep relationships, etc. How can one do both? One can definitely do both, but it is quite challenging in lay life, particularly when you have a lot of responsibilities that take up your time and your energy. It can be difficult, yes, to find time to really develop spiritual practice, to have time to meditate every day, and to be able to really attend to this path of practice. And I can appreciate that. I think, though, that if we really consider the Buddha's teachings again and again, just give time to contemplate the teachings so that in everyday life we can apply them. You may have some time to meditate every day, and I really hope you do. And that's so important, so valuable, whenever possible, just to have time to stop and to sit and to be with the way things are. This is an enormous resource. It's like recharging the batteries. It's like the great resourcing that helps us with the rest of life, to have a developing mindfulness that can then be continue through all the other activities of our lives. But also we can help ourselves enormously in everyday life, working and fulfilling all the responsibilities that we have, supporting others. If we watch the mind, just see what's happening. Notice, for instance, John, you can focus on where there's reactivity. Notice. We can notice this when there's a reaction to something, to anything at all, when there's a leaning towards, a wanting, or there's a turning away from, any kind of aversion, any kind of desire. We can notice that. And as soon as you notice that, then we, to bring the attention to that, to see what's happening, we can be freeing up so that we're not kind of operating automatically in moving towards what we like and turning away from what we don't like, but rather we're seeing those inclinations and paying attention then. How does that feel? What's it like? What's happening inside? Literally, how does it feel physically? What's happening to the breath? Take reactivity as an opportunity to develop mindfulness, to come back to the body momentarily, to pause before jumping into following the reactivity. So notice desire, notice aversion, and pause, and be with the feeling, be with the suffering right there. And then we can see how we don't have to be on kind of automatic pilot through our lives. No, we can be developing mindfulness. Noticing liking and disliking is a very helpful way to really keep liberating the mind in our everyday lives. And for sure, yes, it's very much possible to develop and attain stream entry. And this is a great goal for all of us, to aim for this, because once we've managed to see through the first three fetters of personality view, of doubt, and of attachment to kind of magical thinking, rites and rituals, superstition. Once we've seen through these fetters, we're really in the flow of Dhamma, and there's absolutely nothing that can stop us from eventually, slowly but surely, attaining the final goal of freedom from all suffering. So take heart and keep watching the mind. We can do this. Keep attending. How is it feeling? Is there suffering? If there's suffering in any moment, get really interested in why that should be happening and come home. It brings us home again and again, and we can do this wonderful work wherever we are, whatever we're doing. So try noticing liking and disliking, and let them be your teachers. I hope that's helpful, John. Thank you for that. And good wishes to all of you. We're time's sort of run to its course, and it's time to finish this session. I'd just like to end by wishing you all every blessing in your practice. Thank you for your kind attention and for your practice.